Hello and welcome to another painting video. In this video I'll be painting the Swampcalla Shaman and his pusty Pot Grot. This filthy looking shaman is one of the reasons I got interested in the Kruleboyz. He looks so menacing and gangly but also has a huge skull on his back for no reason. I love it. And of course his little Pot Grot is just the perfect companion piece. Let's begin, shall we? Although the shaman isn't showing much skin, I start with it anyway, as it is hidden away and will be difficult to paint later on. I start with a coat of Celestra Grey. Next, I shade the skin with a mix of Plaguebearer Flesh and Lamia Medium. To layer the skin, I make a mix of Celestra Grey and Ulthuan Grey. I make sure I keep the previous shade in the recesses. Then I add a highlight of Ulthuan Grey to the skin. The parts that are in shadow will get a glaze of Guilliman Blue. And I use Bloodletter glaze to redden the areas with more blood flow, like his lips, nose, ears, and elbows. Finally, I add a highlight of Palette Switch Flesh because the Bloodletter was a little bit too strong on some parts. Although I already have 3 skin variations, I want my heroes to look a bit different. A very pale, almost albino Swampcalla Shaman makes him look even more creepy. It's difficult to see here because my zenithal highlight was a bit splotchy, but the shaman has a robe and a cloak. The robe I paint with Deathworld Forest. Then I shade it with Athonian Camoshade. And shade it again with Agrax Earthshade. I highlight the robe with Deathguard Green. And finish with a highlight of Nurgling Green. Here I think it's important to make a distinction between the robe and the cloak. This will make all the details stand out a bit more. Before I paint the cloak, I will paint the armor plates he has underneath them. The 2 plates I paint with Incubi Darkness. And then shade them with Known Oil. The first highlight is Thunderhawk Blue. And the second highlight is Fenrisian Grey. Again, a different color to make the details stand out more. Here it's also important to make sure the colors go together. Now I'm going to paint the cloak he has draped over him. The cloak I paint with Nagaroth Night. This gives a nice dark purple base coat. I shade it with Known Oil. The first highlight is a mix between Dark Reaper and Sotek Green. And the second highlight is Thunderhawk Blue. Lastly, I paint all the stitches on all the cloth with Black Templar. This is starting to look like a creepy swamp shaman right there. He has a lot of dark colors, but he also has a pretty big scenic base, so I am not too worried he'll be hard to spot on the battlefield. It's time to paint that huge skull he has on his back. First, I paint the entire skull with Karak Stone. Then I layer on Ushabti bone. I make sure I keep the previous color showing on all the parts that could be in shadow. I shade the entire skull with Skeleton Horde. With a stippling motion, I reapply Ushabti bone to the skull. Using a stippling or feathering motion will create some texture on the big areas. I do the same here with Screaming Skull as the final highlight. I tried to make some texture on the big surfaces of the skull using the highlight. I think it looks way more interesting this way than highlighting just the edges. Next up is his staff. I paint any wood on the model with Dryad Bark. This also includes his little cup in his left hand. Next, I paint all the metal on the model with Iron Hand Steel. Any bronze items I paint with Sycorax Bronze. This paint doesn't cover very well, so it's best to have an underlining metallic layer to speed up the process. Next, I wash the wood and metal with Agrax Earthshade. Both metal colors may look a bit cheap, but adding Reichland flesh shade to them makes them look very nicely aged and dirty. I paint rust in 2 steps. First, I stipple on Scrag Brown. And then I stipple on Troll Slayer Orange. You can also use Ryza Rust for this. On all the metal, I stipple on Runefang Steel. This also helps break up the rust I have painted on. On his dagger, I add some Tesseract Glow to simulate his poisoned weapon. The wood gets a highlight of Baneblade Brown. And finally, I add some Nihilakh Oxide on the bronze. This step covered a lot of details on the model. Also on the skull we have some metal gubbins, and the shaman is pretty festooned with metal all around. Next up is his strange brew coming from the cup. I paint the brew with white scar so I can start with a clean base coat. Then I paint the brew with the contrast paint Volupus Pink. I already have the next paint ready to go because while the previous paint is still wet, I add Shyish Purple to the base of the brew in the cup. This will help the 2 paints blend more. I highlight the brew with a mix of Genestealer Purple and Emperor's Children. Then I add Palette Switch Flesh to the mix and highlight again. I end with a highlight of Palette Switch Flesh. The brew now becomes lighter near the end of the tip and looks pretty dangerous. When I'm painting the Pot Grot, I'll show a different way of painting something like this. There are several bottles on the shaman. I paint all these with Blue Horror. I needed 2 coats to get a nice even color. I'm going to be painting 3 color potions. The first is with Uruk Flesh. The second is Evil Sunz Scarlet. Make sure you paint the liquid as it would be moving in an actual bottle. The shaman is in motion, and that means the liquid is as well. The last potion is painted with Zeru's Purple. Then I go back to the green potion and highlight the top with Skarsnik Green. The red potion gets highlighted with Wild Rider Red. I also add some dots to simulate bubbles in liquid. And the purple potion gets a highlight of Genestealer Purple. The green potion gets a highlight of Skarsnik Green mixed with White Scar. The red potion gets a highlight of Wild Rider Red mixed with White Scar. And the purple potion gets a highlight of Genestealer Purple mixed with White Scar. Finally, I add a dot or line of White Scar to simulate the light reflecting from the bottle. On to the little Pot Grot. I paint his skin with a mix of Celestra Grey and Ulthan Grey. Then I shade the skin with Druchii Violet. I go back to my previous mix of Celestra Grey and Ulthan Grey and layer this back on the skin. Then I highlight the skin with Ulthan Grey. The parts in shadow get a glaze of Guilliman Blue. And certain areas get a glaze of Bloodletter, mostly the face and joints. His teeth get painted with Ushabti Bone and shaded with Skeleton Horde. His eyes get painted with White Scar. And lastly, I add a glaze of Lamenter's Yellow to make them yellow. As you can see, I also painted the clothes of the Pot Grot. I used the same recipes I did for my gut repast. His huge cauldron I paint with Stegadon Scale Green. Then I add a thick shade of Nuln Oil. I layer back Stegadon Scale Green on parts where the light would hit the cauldron. On those previous parts I now layer on Dark Reaper. I continue with lighter colors. This time it's Thunderhawk Blue. And I end with a highlight of Fenrisian Grey. The brew the Pot Grot is stirring is painted with Auroch Flesh. I then heavily wash it with Biel-Tan Green. The first layer is a mix of Auroch Flesh and Skarsnik Green. The second layer is a mix of Skarsnik Green and Krieg Khaki. And I end with a highlight of Krieg Khaki. And here we have the Swampcalla Shaman and his Pot Grot. What a fun duo to have in your army. I gave them both 2 scenic bases using pieces of tree bark, which really look like small rocks from miniatures. To keep adding variation in my army, these models use different skin tones and different rags colors. But the bases will all bring them together as one army. I haven't decided yet what my next video will be. Could be the Hobgoblins or the Slogoth. Let me know in the comments which one you would prefer. In the meantime, be sure to check out my Instagram, where I post pictures of my projects and behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching.